Hello, dreamers, and welcome to the 330th episode of Killafornia Dreaming. I'm your host, Roseanne. This is the fourth and probably not going to be the last part of this series on the 2013 shooting death of 42-year-old Jason Rogers by his wife, Rebecca Rogers, who claimed that she shot Jason in self-defense. So if you haven't listened to the first three parts, you're going to want to listen to those first and then come back to this one. Before we get started, I have a few notes about this show. This podcast is a one-woman production from start to finish. Every episode is researched, and by researched, I mean binge-watching crime shows, written, recorded, and edited, and put out there into the universe by yours truly. We have been and always will be ad-free, which means we are 100% listener-supported, and there are a number of ways that you can help. You can follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. Leave reviews on the various platforms you listen to your podcast on. And if you just can't seem to get enough of this podcast, you can become a subscriber on Patreon, where for starting at just $1 a month, you can gain access to hundreds of hours of content to doze off to that you won't hear anywhere else. And if you're in town or you're local to Las Vegas, you can support my small business that I have here. It's called Costa Oil. It's the only one in the state of Nevada. It's a quick oil change shop, and really there is nothing else out there like it in terms of value and quality. If you come through, we'll take care of you, or just follow the shop along with my podcast on Facebook and Instagram. I just added the links into the show notes for the oil shop as well to make it easier for you to find us. And that's all the junk that I have for now. I'll recap what we've covered last time and in the past couple of episodes, and then we'll get on with what I was hoping to be the last part of this series, but clearly it's not going to be, because I just can't seem to stop talking about this lady. This is the tale of reading between the bullshit, the ridiculous interrogation of Rebecca Rogers. So in part 3, we continued to dissect Rebecca Rogers' post-husband shooting interview, which really was an interrogation from the beginning, since the officers speaking to Rebecca already seemed to have decided that there was nothing to see here, since this woman shot her husband in the back, ultimately killing him. It's been my theory that the ball was dropped when it came to getting Rebecca charged and convicted of the crime she deserved to be charged and convicted of. I ended up going over some other cases in the previous episode. It feels like more so than getting through this case at times, so I'm going to try to stay on task. Well, I did try, and I think I did. So I was attempting to wrap this up in another 2-hour-long episode, but I can't do it. In my notes, it says if I can't do it, I clearly can't do it. So this is going to go into 5 parts, and I apologize for that, but I am enjoying this, so I hope that you are too. We did some comparing and contrasting with the recent case of Gerhardt and Ariel Koenig, that Hawaiian doctor who tried to kill his wife on a birthday hike. When he went on trial, he took the stand in his own defense. He made the claim that it was actually Ariel who attempted to kill him. That did not go over well, and I believe he's currently awaiting sentencing still. I'm not sure. I haven't looked it up yet. For attempted murder. Luckily, Ariel survived that attack. We also talked about the 2013 disappearance of Gary Herbst and how his wife and son were eventually charged and convicted of crimes related to their involvement in what turned out to be Gary's murder. I compared how Gary's son Austin, who admitted to shooting his father, how he came across as believable when he spoke about his fear of his father, and how his interviews landed very differently with a level of genuineness and believability versus how Rebecca here is landing with us, well, at least with me. It seems that most of you who have listened and commented and reached out to me to talk about this agree that this woman is clearly full of it. We started to hear the detectives getting to the details of the shooting while they work on locking Rebecca into her story that she's trying to put together to justify what feels to me very much like a premeditated murder. We left off where Rebecca's lies were about to start being challenged by these investigators questioning her, as it's going to be pretty obvious that the evidence is not going to line up with what Rebecca is trying to claim happened. So let's pick up the story from there. The next thing that they're going to talk about is blood being left in places that Rebecca's version of events really can't explain away. So, like I said, we left off where the detectives had asked Rebecca about when, after she shot Jason, and he started to try to get up or to come after her, as she described, they asked, did she shoot him again? Rebecca automatically replied quickly with a no. But then she said she shot twice, she thinks. Yeah, she did shoot him at least twice, more than twice, actually. She would end up shooting Jason 3 times. And she would say when she saw blood on his head, she started shooting. Just a bunch of vagueness and a bunch of dodginess. And so the detectives do a lot of uncomfortable pausing all around these statements. So the next thing Rebecca was asked was he facing you when you shot him and hit him in the head? Quietly, Rebecca said, no, I don't think so. Which way was he facing? Think he was angled towards the closet. She wouldn't even say the word, I think he was angled towards the closet, in order to own what she says. She doesn't want it to be her to admit how Jason was facing away from her. In reality, he was not facing her when she shot him in the head. In fact, what she's going to say later on is even worse than that. This is, after all, one of the most devastating places to be shot at, in the head. This woman can't even take responsibility, even in the statements that she's making, by saying the words, I think. She just says, think he was angled towards the closet. I'm telling you, even these tiny little itty bitty 1-letter omissions mean so much more if you dig just past the surface of what this woman's saying. So after that statement, Rebecca again attempted to boost the idea that she has no idea by asking the detectives more questions. The next thing she said after making the statement, think he was angled towards the closet, she said, I'm not sure. Where was the shots on his head? The detective replied, I haven't been up there to talk to them and see yet. Rebecca said, that's why I was trying to think about it outside, because I thought it was on the left side. So I don't know why he was laying that way in the bedroom. Pause. Because the left side, he was facing the closet unless he fell. I don't know. You see, dreamers, she is pausing a lot. It does still feel like she's waiting for some help or some information from the detectives in order to provide an answer that matches what she seems to think they know, or the information that she wants to know what they have, which they probably do. But we know that they're not going to give away anything because they need to lock her into a story and they need the answers to come from her. They don't want to give her any information. I just wish that these detectives locked her in a little bit more thoroughly than they did. I don't know. Everyone at the time was so taken with this woman and her alleged plight and all the boo-hooing from her daughters when it came time for sentencing. The community support is what I'm talking about here. And she wasn't sentenced until 2016. And there just isn't enough information out there for me to even find out what the holdup was on that, why it took 3 years. I just imagine it was a whole bunch of stalling. Rebecca was out on bail, so she was probably just dragging this out, trying to procrastinate against the inevitable, Rebecca and her attorney likely spent all that time trying to get the case tossed out on the self-defense claim, and it just was not working. Rebecca also had a ton of public support, which probably didn't hurt. But at the end of the day, it likely came down to one simple question. Did Rebecca really want to roll the dice at trial? And let's be honest, this is not a woman who wanted to spend another night in jail. Because here's the thing. If she truly believed everything that she was trying to sell, this whole domestic violence, fearing for her life, kill or be killed narrative, there is no way she's going to take a plea. Not a chance. Not after all the dramatic retellings. He was choking me and I was so scared and I was like, stop. Endlessly on repeat, like a broken record of lies. If Rebecca actually stood behind her story, if she really truly believed in what she was saying, she would have taken this all the way. And if she got hit with 30 years for second-degree murder, fine. She could have leaned all of that way into that survivor narrative that she worked so hard to build in this interrogation room. She could have stood by her story, started a support group, advocated for change, made it her life's mission. People do that. Would I have done that? Probably not. But you know what? I definitely wouldn't have done? Trivialize real domestic violence survivors with a conveniently timed, made-up story just to dodge a murder charge. Because nothing that this woman says at any point here or anywhere else in this interrogation points to actual abuse. Not physical abuse, not emotional abuse, not psychological abuse, not financial abuse, nothing. If anything, Rebecca is the one that comes across as the aggressor in the relationship. And that's not uncommon. Though the woman in a relationship is often the aggressor. I was aggressive in my marriage because I was pissed and I hated his stupid ass. If only Jason were here to defend himself, or better yet, if he were still alive so his daughters could hear his side of the story and decide for themselves who they wanted to believe and who they wanted to side with. I can't help but wonder how that would have played out differently if this man would have survived. But anyway, Rebecca is again fishing for information that she is not going to catch. These detectives aren't going to be easily hooked, lined, and sunk as most others were at the time, because they're going to challenge what Rebecca says, and she is going to begin to get increasingly exasperated and frustrated with it. I mean, being made to answer up to shooting somebody can get uncomfortable, I'm sure. I wouldn't know because I haven't shot anybody. So the detective next said, is it possible that you had made it into the bedroom before you had to shoot him a second time? And Rebecca replied, I don't believe I did, no. And that's because she can't be inside the bedroom, because that messes up her lies that she's already told up to this point. So they asked, I guess what I'm saying is, if he's coming at you then, and Rebecca just cut him off. She seems to be very aware that her story isn't lining up with the more pointed questions that these detectives are starting to ask her. She can tell. She didn't even let the detective finish what he was asking when she cut him off and said, no, it was close proximity from the door to here where he was. She paused and paused and paused, and she's waiting for help from the detectives, waiting. She said nothing for about 15 seconds. And yes, I counted. Rebecca obviously needs some help getting her lies to line up with the facts, and these detectives aren't giving anything up. She continued, I know I stepped over him when it initially happened, but I did not go back over him after I was in the room talking to the dispatcher because he was, and now the detective cut her off and said, what do you mean? Were you still out in the hallway and stepped over him? She interrupted him and said, I was in the bedroom when I talked to the dispatcher. He asked, and then you came out? Here, Rebecca will continue on about how afraid she was. No, I didn't come back out that way because I was afraid to go back over him because he was moving around. Completely ignoring Rebecca's expressions of fear, yet again, the detective said, and you said you stepped over him once and you did not want to go back over him a second time? By now, the officer sounds like he's talking in his sleep. I actually put way too much enunciation and way too much of myself and emotion into that statement, but it was more like he said it like this. And you said you stepped over him once and you didn't want to go back over him a second time. This guy clearly doesn't give two shits about what she's saying. She talked over him again and said, "Right. I was first on the dispatcher when it first happened. I'm pretty sure I must have stepped over him after I called 911." Sounding skeptical, the detective said, "Okay, let me tell you something. I don't and this okay. There's blood going down the hallway." Uh-oh. This sounds like this is one of those places that blood is found where blood shouldn't be found if Rebecca's story is true. There's blood going down the hallway, okay? And that's what I'm trying to figure out is how blood got going down the hallway. Drops of blood. Rebecca replied, "Is it from my hand?" While at the same time, she's showing this tiny injury on her hand. The detective looked at it briefly and said, "No, I don't think that would have bled enough to be like that." Rebecca goes right back into denial, saying, "He never came out of the room." "All right then, lady, explain the blood." If she's expecting the chaos of the shooting itself to be enough to cover up forensic evidence that will prove or at least strongly suggest what really happened, she's sorely mistaken because, hello, they're going to figure it out if they do the investigation properly. But Rebecca begins to do what a lot of liars do. Just put out a story that fits best into the narrative that they're trying to put forth and then stand by that story no matter what. These people will insist and insist and insist until their dying day that what they said happened the way that they said it happened. That's the story. They're sticking to it. End of it, period. They're not changing. Because if they change their story, then that means they lied. Rebecca has already said that Jason never came out of the room. Even in the face of irrefutable evidence that can prove otherwise, she will stand by what she said. They're telling her that blood is going down the hallway, and she'll repeat, "He never came out of the room." Blood drops? Nope, never came out of the room. DNA testing proves it was Jason's? Nope, never came out of the room. He dripped blood into the hallway? Never happened. Okay, Rebecca, if you say so. These detectives pressed on. Quote, "There wasn't by chance that you hit him going down the hallway, was there?" "No." Well. My. What, pray tell, could this officer actually be suggesting here? Perhaps the deadly confrontation between the two of them began in the hallway? Maybe Rebecca started shooting him in the back in the hall. He deposited blood as he traveled up the hallway, made his way into the bedroom, collapsed onto the ground where she finished him off with another round in the back and a third and final one in the back of the head. Yeah, all of them. We will soon hear the detective tell Rebecca. All three of those shots came from the back to the front. Each one of them. Never was there a time that Jason was facing Rebecca when she shot any of those shots into him. Rebecca here is hoping to be able to build her story around the possibility of Jason and the magic bullet being part of a three-ring circus contortionist act. He gave Rebecca the chance to change her story, but she's committed, so she's going to keep going with the alternative facts that she hopes will somehow fool somebody, anybody. But after she said no very firmly that Jason never came out of the room, she paused for a moment to think of something that would allow room for a variation of her alternative facts that she might dream up later on that might fit, and said, "Not unless when I went in," and she paused and paused and paused. "Okay, when I went over, I know it was on the dispatcher because he told me to go out the window to meet with the officers because he said, 'Will your little ones open the door?' And I said, 'I don't know. Somebody's going to have to open the door.' So I went out the window, came in, and went back and got JC, and I got Riley, and I went outside." And she didn't answer the question. Here, dreamers, Rebecca is deflecting and trying to divert the conversation away from her story being contradicted by the actual, real, physical evidence that's been found at the scene. These detectives kept going, and the pressure is being kept on as they next asked, "But you're certain that you fired 2 rounds from the doorway?" Rebecca replied, "I'm pretty certain. I know that I called 911 after that. I mean, I left the room to call 911, probably to get the phone." Her emotions started dialing up again, and cue the whiny voice. I don't know," she cried. Here, these detectives are about to confront Rebecca with yet another inconvenient truth. They asked, "Because there's probably 4 or 5 shell casings inside the bedroom." Now, Rebecca, with the incredulous tone, replied, completely shocked, "What?" "Yeah, so that's why I'm asking. Did you shoot more than twice?" Rebecca paused for 10 seconds and then replied, "It's possible. Like I said, I stopped shooting when I saw blood." "Yes, Rebecca, you did shoot more than twice. You also shot him more than twice." Rebecca wants to try to confuse the detectives by confusing the scene with her lame attempt at memory loss and the dramatics of the moment, but this woman clearly analyzes and questions everything that she's being told and asked. You can just tell she's picking and choosing what she says very carefully. At times, Rebecca lets things slip, but that's normal when you're getting up to her age, past 40, approaching 50, things start to feel a little bit dull. It takes a lot of energy and effort and memory to keep lies going, but also to repress our natural ability to recall and remember true facts and things that actually happened. But Rebecca here is trying to keep up with these detectives the best way that she can. And it's not that she's quick, she's just committed and determined, and she will fiercely stand by her word as much as she can, as best as she can. She's just not that good at it. And she's not going to outsmart these detectives who know what a crime scene is supposed to look like. No, they didn't dig as deep as they could have, but to be honest, if I had to sit there for an hour and listen to this lady's nonsense, I'd be ready to slap the cuffs on her so I could just get on with my evening. The next thing the detective does is challenge Rebecca's story based on where he knew the shell casings left on the ground from her shooting Jason and shooting into the walls and whatnot, where those shell casings were laying. After Rebecca claimed that she stopped shooting when she saw blood, the detective stated, "And also, from the shell casings, where they were laying at, it would indicate that you were inside the room and not at the doorway because of the way that type of pistol ejects the rounds. It doesn't have an extractor that kicks it left or kicks it right. It throws it straight up and down. So for them to end up over here, that would mean that you would have to be in the room. That's why I need you to concentrate on that and think hard of where exactly you were when it happened." At this point, the other detective walked back into the room, and this prompted them to both leave for a few minutes. He said, "I'm going to give you a minute to think on that, okay? You'll brainstorm on that for a second." He didn't even wait for her to answer. He gathered up his papers, got up, and said, "I'll be right back." And both of them left the room, and the video interrogation skips to when one of them comes back in. When the detective came back into the interview room, he was with another investigator, a female who was going to take photographs of any injuries that Rebecca may have had, as well as collect a sample of her DNA. After photos were taken, the investigator asked Rebecca if she had any more injuries or anything that they hadn't taken pictures of. Okay, beginning of my rant. And this genius says, I don't know. I'm sore, but I'm just sore." Okay, you dumbass. I can't even with this broad. What the hell? This investigator just asked if there was anything that hadn't been photographed, and Rebecca answers with, "I don't know. I'm just sore." Unless I experienced a particularly excessive drunken night, I might not know if I had any injury someplace that I can't readily see somewhere on me. But other than that, I'm pretty sure, like most, if not all of us, that I have enough awareness to know where I would have gotten hurt if I had been in a battle to the death and survived. And secondly, and Rebecca here, she just can't freaking help herself. She just can't stop herself from continuing to make Jason's soon to be murder all about herself again. She's sore. Oh, Lord, with the soreness again. Can you just not, lady? Please have some self-awareness and realize how lame all of this is. She's going to sit there and tell somebody, anybody who will listen, that she's sore. While in the meantime, Jason's on an operating table with one foot in the morgue. But she's sore. Boo fucking who? And thirdly, how in the cheese balls is anyone supposed to photograph soreness? She's so dumb. Oh, she just makes me want to slap the stupid out of her. Okay, end of rant. So after they do the collecting of the evidence from Rebecca, the pictures and the DNA and stuff, the detectives come back into the room, and at this point, I think they're just going to start asking her to do stuff purely for shits and giggles. And I've never seen anything like it, but seriously, it almost seems like this is a joke to them. Like they cannot seriously be doing all this right now. So one of them comes back in and is standing in the doorway. And guess what, dreamers? You want to know what time it is? It's reenactment time. They're literally going to make this woman stand up. This poor, sore woman actually stand up and show them how she was positioned and how Jason was positioned. And they're going to use the interrogation room door as the closet door. And she's going to go ahead and try and show them. When after I've watched this several times, I feel like Rebecca should have refused. She should have flat out refused talking to these detectives from the beginning. I think she just thought that they would fall for her poor me blubbering and whining about, I thought he was going to kill me presentation to them. And before long, she and her stupid lying ass would be on their way home to begin playing the grieving widow before the night was over. Instead, they're going to turn her whole entire presentation into a show and tell. And you can see that Rebecca does not want to do this. She feels stupid, as she should. But she can't help but repeatedly throw her hands up and let them drop to her sides in exasperation. She giggles nervously because she undoubtedly understands just how ridiculous they're making her out to be. And at this point, it just feels like they're mocking her. Just like she's been mocking them and everyone else by assuming that they're all so dumb that they're just going to buy her story at face value. It's insulting. It's beyond insulting when someone lies to you so blatantly and then is aghast when you actually don't believe them. I think these detectives are just sick and freaking tired of this woman thinking she's getting over on them. And they're going to make her act stuff out like a circus monkey. We've seen suspects being asked to demonstrate how things went down, but what they're making Rebecca do and what they're going to make her do is literally like next level ridiculousness. So the detective says, Ms. Rogers, so if this was your bedroom and this was like your bedroom door, does this door open the same way as your bedroom door does? Yeah. And where is the closet right behind it? Yes. The door is at the side of the closet? Yes. And you have like a little piece of wall right here and then the other side is your side? Yes. And then on the side is your side? Yes. Does your side have a door on it? It does, but it doesn't have a handle. So yours is never shut? So they're always open? Yes. Okay. Where is his gun usually kept at? On his side? On his side, like at the top of the closet or just inside? Of course, when it comes to these important questions, because her claim is that Jason went to the closet to retrieve his gun, so obviously she has some awareness of where it's at. But when it comes to these important questions, Rebecca gets super defensive and provides answers that don't actually answer. She replied, "It's not on the bottom. I mean, he has a shotgun." The detective said, "Well, obviously because of the small children and stuff, You want to keep it higher, right? A shotgun in the bottom, but like in the corner inside? Yeah. Does he keep it like the bullets and stuff up? I don't know. Honestly, the last time when he left, he took it with him to his mom's. And after he moved back home, he went back and got it. And I don't know. I never looked at it. I don't know if it was loaded. I don't know. The second detective had re entered the room during this exchange and finally spoke up with his questions. Well, when I talked to you earlier, you said you had taken it and hid it from him. I've done that before, yes. When you got it that time, where did you get it from to hide it? Again, Rebecca applies an answer, non-answer, and says, we weren't living there on one occasion. Totally avoiding the question again because I have a feeling this never happened. But she continued, we weren't living there on one occasion, so on all the other occasions you were living there. So how about we talk about the one that isn't even relevant, right? We were in the apartment back when we just had Emma. I mean, this was years ago. Why in the frickety frack are we talking about this? Why are you answering today's questions with answers from 15 years ago? Geez, lady, you just shot your husband. Just answer the damn questions. She's sitting here talking about hiding a gun from a guy she ended up shooting one time a decade and a half ago when she literally said he always goes for the gun. It's the first thing he goes for. I actually can't remember if I've already gone over that part yet. I might be getting ahead of myself here. But she does say that. She says he always goes for the gun. It's the first thing he goes for. So why in the world is she bringing up an incident about her supposedly hiding this gun from him in an apartment that they no longer live in when they only had the one kid all these years ago? Why is she talking about that now? If he always goes for the gun and she always tries to hide it from him, where does he keep it and where do you hide it? Simple questions, simple answers, and she can't even do it. She's talking about irrelevant shit from 15 years ago. I know why. Because she has to bring up irrelevant stuff because none of this shit ever happened. She can see the direction that this interview is going, which is pretty much not in her favor in any way, shape, or form. So she goes back to talking about petty fights that they had in the past, more examples of his outrageously homicidal violence towards her, right? After she said there was one occasion before they ever had any kids together that she had to hide his gun from him. That's pretty early on for this to actually be a thing, right? After she brought up all that unnecessary junk, she said, there was another time when we had actually gone on a canoe trip and there was this big fight between him and another guy. So it's a fight not even with her this time, okay, Rebecca? He's fighting with somebody else and this is what you want to talk about right now when you just shot him. Another guy and my sister and I was scared because the whole way home and he was talking about divorce and he was irate. She pauses, and then she blurts out, he's bipolar. Okay. She pauses here because she's totally expecting a reaction again from these detectives and she does not get it. They actually don't care. And this is something that she shoulda, coulda, woulda said early on. Was he diagnosed as bipolar? Seriously, if she is just talking about this now, that she sees her story is turning Swiss cheesy, then he probably wasn't. Sure, as the day is long, I'm absolutely positive that Rebecca would have used that against Jason early on, don't you think? Not that being bipolar means that he's violent, but it could have been taken into consideration in relation to his overall personality, his emotions, his reactions, things of that nature. This woman would have used anything to disparage Jason. Why not his mental health struggles? Maybe because she just made it up? He could have been showing signs of bipolar disorder, but there isn't enough information about this case to say anyway, either way. And Rebecca doesn't expand on it or put any context around that claim. He's bipolar. She just blurted it out there. And she paused and paused and paused, waited for reaction, got none, and said, he's just up and down. These pauses, dreamers, are so awkward and cringy because, again, we can tell that Rebecca is waiting for these detectives to ask more questions so she can start blaming Jason for his own shooting, but they're literally just letting Rebecca sit in her own shit. And after she said, "He's up and down," she paused twice. But when they just sat there in silence, she finally moved on and said, "But anyway, on that occasion we got home, the whole time, I was thinking about hiding it." Pause, pause, pause. Nothing, nothing, nothing. "So I brought it out and gave it to my mom and he didn't know it, but it's always the first thing he goes to look for." Wow. Like, seriously, Rebecca? She's literally saying that the guy who ended up shot and will end up dying 2 days after this interview, he's the one who always goes for the gun. They'd been married for about 14 or 15 years. They had 3 daughters together, and her oldest is Jason's stepdaughter since she was the age of 4. And he's saying that ever since before they had their 3 children, that he's already threatened to grab his gun every single time he argues. That's what she's saying. He goes for it every single time they argue. That's not just a little bit of a red flag. That's a lot of bit of a red flag. But she stayed with him, had 3 kids, built a home. And even though she paints him as the aggressor who goes for the guns after every fight, she ends up being the one shooting him. Go figure, right? So after Rebecca said that it's always the first thing it goes for, the detective asked, "And that one you brought out was a pistol or a shotgun?" Rebecca replied, "It was the 9mm. I didn't have this. Is it a pistol? Is that what it's called? I don't know." Yeah, here she's playing dumb even more. He replied, "The 9mm? No, what I use today, I know it's like, it's not a 22. What? A 30? 32? You know, dreamers, I'm fairly certain that no matter how ignorant someone is about guns, she knows what she bought. She knows what caliber the gun that she shot Jason with is. She knows it's a pistol and not a revolver. She's just, again, trying to make it seem like this wasn't something that she would have ever done. She wants us all to believe, based purely on her acting like she doesn't know anything about the very gun she went and got on her own, herself, behind Jason's back, which she probably asked advice about what kind of gun and what caliber of gun would be best to carry for those occasions when you might need to defend yourself or kill your husband or something. She probably got advice and went with whatever that person sold her at the gun shop suggested. And she wants us to believe that she has no idea, because being ignorant are these people's favorite thing to do to try and justify their actions. Ignorance is no justification. I'm sorry. I'm not buying it. And she's really not doing a good job of selling it anyway. So the next thing that happens is the investigator with the camera comes back in again to take pictures of Rebecca's eyes, and the video skips to the next line of questioning. The detective said, "So, you don't know if he keeps his guns loaded or not then, do you?" Rebecca's reply is in typical evasive and vague form. Quote, "He has on occasion, and he has sometimes not. I mean, I don't," and oh, she pauses again, throws her hands up like she's the poster child for cluelessness. I have no idea what she's trying to sort out in these dramatic little gaps, but of course, she keeps refusing to give a straight answer to utterly simple questions, because clarity is obviously overrated when you can instead perform a masterclass in feigned ignorance. After about 5 suspenseful seconds, she finally says, "I don't know if it was loaded or not. Did y'all find it?" Very subtle, Rebecca, very subtle. And naturally, she's peppering the detectives with more questions as if they're the ones auditioning for her trust. They mostly refuse to spoon feed her any details at all. And this is basically the first time that Rebecca really tries to call them out for supposedly not knowing what they do and don't know. And surprise, surprise, they cut that little performance off fast. When she asked if they found the gun, the answer is, I don't know. I've been here with you most of the time. And Rebecca, bless her heart, has the audacity to reply, yeah, I know, but you also said that you didn't know how many times he was shot, and you told me that there were 4 or 5 casings in the room. Right, the nerve of these detectives daring to be imperfect, according to her, while she conveniently forgets the whole reason why everyone's lives are now in a dumpster fire. She's the one that set all of this in motion. Yet, her big priority is to call these cops out for their quote-unquote half-truths, like proving they lie somehow cancels out her mountains of deception. Equal liar playing field, anybody? As if everyone being a liar, pants on fire, would prove her situation to be true. So they shut that nonsense down cold and said, yeah, I didn't know how many times he'd been shot, okay? You got bullet holes through your walls that clearly aren't from him, but there are shell casings there. You see where I'm going? So I don't know. Rebecca just ended up sitting there looking dumb as the detective kept going. When you walked into the room, was he kneeling down or was he standing up in the closet? Standing. He was standing? Yes. Would you mind just kind of using the door as an example? Kind of show me what happened? Walk us through it as if this was the closet and just kind of walk us through it all? I mean, like, if you came down the hall and was the door open or closed of y'all's bedroom? It was open. It was open because he actually peeked out the hallway. Probably when he heard me. And she trailed off. Oh, look. Now what? She conveniently cut herself off before admitting yet again that she fired a shot inside the house while fiddling with the trigger and the safety. How thoughtful of her to stop confessing the incriminating bit every single time she's forced to reply and explain her actions. Those well-timed self-interruptions are pure strategy on her part. Part performance, part damage control, all bullshit. Anyway, these two detectives, they both got out of their seats and they opened the door. Rebecca, to me, she kind of looks pretty mortified. She doesn't stand up right away. She's looking at these guys like they just asked her to perform brain surgery. And the chances of that happening are just about as likely in this moment as them getting the truth out of her, which is pretty much non-existent. After Rebecca cut herself off, the detective completed the sentence for her and said that Jason peeked down the hallway probably when he heard me fired off the first round. Yes. She keeps throwing her hands up as if she's completely clueless as to what happened earlier that day and lets them drop down so they slap her thighs. She's standing up at this point, albeit reluctantly, and you could just tell she does not want to reenact shit. And if she had half a brain, she would refuse to. And to me, this would be kind of pretty traumatizing to make somebody do just hours after they were attacked and almost killed by their own husband. Which goes to show just how little consideration these detectives had for Rebecca and her story. In fact, if I felt like this was a legitimate self-defense case, I'd be on her side, honestly. And I think these detectives would treat her a hell of a lot differently than they are. And I mean, just in this portion of the conversation, Rebecca described Jason as having peeked down the hallway. That was her words. After she fired that supposed accidental shot in the dining room area. Jason just peeked. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less. Little boop down the hallway. A gunshot supposedly erupted inside this home. In close quarters. In close proximity. And Jason just pokes his head out from behind the door and takes a little look-see. Just a peek. So stupid. But they keep going with their questions. Now, was he standing behind the door of the closet? When I came into the bedroom, and here, Rebecca juggles some words around again to avoid taking responsibility, but she can't seem to quite get the lies to sound the way she wants them to. As she then says, When I came into the bedroom, then I walked. I mean, I walked in. Do you see what she did there? She tried to rephrase it. Instead of saying I walked in, she wanted to say it, but realized she had to be talking about herself and really couldn't refer to herself as it without sounding extra super stupid. But she tried to move on quickly. As she next said, it's not as wide as this, but I walked in and I just shot. Was he turning to look at you? Well, yeah, I mean, because he was coming after me. Do you remember from which side? Now here, at this point, Rebecca gets real irritated with the do you remember questions, because what she's really being asked is, can you tell a straight story for once? She's frustrated and exasperated. She puts her hands over her face and says, I don't know. And then she laughed a little bit. She strained her voice out to sound real pitchy, annoyed, and annoying. I don't know. I mean, all I know is, like I said, I don't remember. All she knows is that she doesn't remember. And she exhaled loudly. I don't remember him laying this way. Another awkward pause. I don't remember if I shot him when he was laying this way or if I shot him and he fell that way. I don't know, but I remember it was on the left side. Another pause. Left side of his head. This whole I remember, I thought, I remember not remembering bullshit just kills me. Because either you remember what happened or you don't. It's honestly amazing to watch someone burn this much mental energy trying to gymnastics their way around accountability. The wording, the hedging, the well, maybe, and the I don't remember, the little nervous giggles, girl, stop. These people, and I'm talking about people in interrogation rooms that are accused of crimes that they fully committed but are trying to deny and get out of being held responsible for. They're apparently bold enough, brave enough, and absolutely convinced enough to pick up a gun and end somebody's life. But the second it's time to explain themselves, suddenly they transform into some scared little creature with selective amnesia. 1 minute they've got the emotional strength and fortitude to make a life-ending decision, and the next thing, they're sitting there boo-hooing, stammering, fake sniffling, and tossing out lies like a clearance sale at Spirit Halloween. And isn't it fascinating how the actual dead person is always the villain in their story? It's always their fault that they're shot. It's their fault that they're dead. The person lying on the cold slab in the morgue is apparently the real problem, while the one who pulled the trigger is just a poor, fragile little victim who can barely remember anything except how scared they supposedly were. Amazing how convenient memory loss becomes once handcuffs in courtrooms enter the chat, right? And Rebecca giggling through parts of this is absolutely unreal to me. Nothing says I feared for my life quite like cracking little smiles while explaining why somebody else ended up dead. The contrast between I had no choice to kill him and tee-hee anyway is honestly so grotesque. It would probably be a parody skit on a comedy show if this actually didn't happen. Because if this were truly self-defense, and I mean real self-defense, there would be grief and shock, consistency, urgency, remorse, something human. Instead, it's this exhausting performance of fake fragility layered over arrogance and narcissism and cowardice. Planning a murder and then blaming the dead person for making you do it is already disgusting and vile enough. But wrapping it all up into nervous little giggles and selective memory, that's next level pathetic. Now the detectives are trying to get to the part where Jason had his back turned to Rebecca when she opened fire. That is a fact that Rebecca cannot bob and weave and dance and shimmy her way around. And it is thoroughly entertaining to see her try, though. After she said that she thought she shot him on the left side of the head, the detective said, "But wasn't he facing you?" And she replied, "Yeah, but I mean, he was coming at me this way." And she spun around 180 degrees counterclockwise when she said this way. "He saw me coming. He saw me when I was coming. He heard the shot, I guess, because he was peeking out, but he was right here. He heard the shot, I guess, because he was peeking out." Yeah, let that sink in for a second. The shot that she's talking about here is that one supposedly sort of accidentally fired shot while fiddling around with the trigger and the safety. Because remember, according to Rebecca, I'd never fired this gun before in my entire life, not once. Total rookie with the firearms, right? So naturally, before allegedly going in to confront Jason, she just needed to do a quick little quality control test fire inside the house first, as one does, apparently. And we're supposed to believe that this was all just innocent confusion. Oopsie daisy, I guess I accidentally discharged a firearm while preparing for my totally spontaneous self-defense situation. Yeah, this is completely normal behavior from someone who's terrified and unfamiliar with guns, right? Sure. But wait, it gets better. Jason hears a gunshot go off in the next room. A gun that he probably didn't even know that Rebecca had. And according to her, his response to hearing the firearm discharge in his own house was not panic, not running, not yelling, not grabbing his little girls, not barricading himself, not calling for help, none of that stuff. Apparently, this man just casually booped his head out of the closet like a confused neighbor wondering what that sound was. And he just looked down the hallway, and here comes Rebecca marching down the hallway with a gun in her hand. She just fired the weapon, and he just, "Oh, it's you," and then goes back to searching for his gun in the closet. And she says that she guesses he heard the gunshot. Okay, sure, because apparently we're dealing with the world's quietest firearm now. Not only did Jason, who was literally in the next room, hear it, but probably half the neighborhood heard it too. Dogs 3 blocks away are likely filing noise complaints with the city. But Rebecca guesses he heard it. Lady, please. You did not just accidentally drop a cotton ball on the carpet. A gun went off inside your house. This isn't some mysterious unsolved acoustic phenomenon here. We're not waiting on NASA to confirm whether or not sound travels through walls. And the way that Rebecca says it too, all casual and uncertain, "I guess he heard it." Yeah, no kidding, lady. I'm guessing he probably also noticed the woman creeping down the hallway holding a gun that she supposedly didn't know how to use 5 minutes earlier. This whole thing is so ridiculous, it's insulting. She's trying so hard to sound unsure and harmless that it circles back around into sounding completely absurd. So, that's the story, and that's what she's going to go with here? Because apparently in Rebecca's world, people hear unexpected gunshots inside their home and are like, "Huh, I wonder what that was," before politely leaning out for a better view. Meanwhile, this mad woman is wandering around, armed with a handgun, after her little accidental trigger experiment, like this is all perfectly reasonable human behavior. The whole thing sounds less like a traumatic life and death event and more like a really terrible screenplay written by someone who actually forgot how human beings react to things and have like actual instincts. But anyway, that's Rebecca's story, and she's rolling with it when she next said, "But he was right here. And he said before, I mean, it wasn't not any time from the time he choked me, and he said, 'I'm going to jail tonight.' I mean, he choked me for a good bit of time. It wasn't just, She literally said that. I shit you not. She makes this gesture with both of her hands slightly positioned in a way, pantomiming putting hands around somebody's neck when she says, it wasn't just, oh. Oh my God. I have to talk about this. It wasn't just, So this is the best that this woman can come up with when describing an alleged brutal attack by her husband? Really? This dramatic life and death horror story that we're supposed to believe? wasn't just like, he took me for a good bit of time. It wasn't just, accompanied by absolutely pitiful little hand demonstration that she does in front of herself as if she's like describing someone helping her zip up her winter coat instead of actually choking her to death. This little performance of hers is so weak and awkward. It actually doesn't feel like somebody recalling a traumatic moment, but instead more like somebody trying to remember a plot of a movie or a TV show that they watched 5 years ago. And let's not forget the truly astonishing part of this story. She says she couldn't breathe. And then she says that she just calmly accepted that she was about to die. Yeah, I know, I keep going back to that. I just can't get over half the shit this lady says. But apparently, Rebecca's human, intrinsic survival instincts just clocked out for the night. And she just relaxed and thought, well, I guess this is it, y'all. See you later. I'll be in heaven. Because that's definitely how people react when being strangled. Totally normal, right? Just lay there. No clawing at the hands, no panicking, no thrashing around, not desperately trying to survive with every ounce of strength left in them like an actual human being would tend to do when oxygen is being cut off. Nope, not Rebecca. Her version of events sounds like she was peacefully boarding a Spirit Airlines flight to the afterlife because that's the only place Spirit Airlines can be found now, in the great beyond. People who are genuinely being choked fight like hell. They scratch, they pull, they kick, pry, grasp, struggle until they either break free or physically lose consciousness from lack of oxygen. That survival instinct is primal. It overrides almost everything else. Nobody just lays there and is like, yes, this seems fine. I'm just going to go into the light. Check you later. And that's exactly why her storytelling feels so hollow and insulting. She trivializes these very real and terrifying human moments where people are actually confronted with death and are forced to make desperate choices to try to survive or to take hold of their own fate. Instead, she tells a story like she's recapping an overly dramatic soap opera scene that she really forgot to properly rehearse. I used the example in a previous episode of those who were trapped inside the World Trade Center towers on September 11th. The people standing at the windows waving shirts or jackets or anything that they could find in the desperate hope that someone might see them and somehow save them. Those individuals were faced with an unimaginable and deeply painful and personal decision, and an impossible decision. They were forced to choose between remaining where they were and burning to death or jumping. While it's believed that somewhere between 200 and 300 people ultimately made that choice, the official count based on witnesses, photographs, and video evidence is 104. Those were the people who experienced those final moments of acceptance, the moment where they understood there was no escape and chose to face death in their own way, on their own terms, rather than wait helplessly for death to come to them. But anyways, Rebecca tells us that she supposedly couldn't breathe, and then she walks us through her innermost thoughts like she's narrating a made-for-TV drama, and then I was like, what am I gonna do? He's gonna kill me. Okay, got it. And apparently Jason, according to her story, decided that strangling Rebecca quietly in a way that would attract basically zero attention from anyone nearby just simply wasn't dramatic enough for him. Nope. Halfway through this alleged murder that he was supposedly trying to pull off, he thought, you know what? Forget this silent method of killing my wife. Let me go grab a firearm and make this situation as loud and attention-grabbing as humanly possible because that makes total sense. Jason was allegedly already winning this fight, right? Already supposedly overpowering Rebecca in a way that wouldn't alert neighbors, wouldn't create noise, wouldn't draw witnesses. and especially bring about the attention of their own two little girls that are in the next room over. But then, he suddenly decided to pivot into the absolute loudest, messiest, worst option imaginable, right smack in the middle of a domestic violence situation, where the last thing someone trying to kill another person would want is to draw attention to themselves. This is why people use stabbing, because if they have access to a gun, they don't want the gunshots to draw people's attention, because it will. Sure, Rebecca, we totally believe you. Imagine if, I went to go rob a bank, but instead of getting what I wanted, holding the bank up and making my way out, I decide, hey, maybe I'll light some fireworks in the lobby first. Meanwhile, Rebecca's contribution to this life or death moment is apparently calmly thinking, gee, what am I going to do? He's going to kill me. That's her story. That's what she's thinking while allegedly being strangled to death while the life is supposedly being squeezed out of her. She somehow had the time and the mental clarity to pause for a reflective internal monologue, like she's the main character in a Broadway dramatic play. She's not clawing, not panicking, not grasping, fighting, or operating on pure survival instinct. Just casually workshopping her options in her head while waiting for the plot to progress. The whole thing hardly sounds like any kind of real human reaction to mortal danger, but instead sounds like someone trying to reverse engineer a self-defense story after the fact without having any kind of grasp or understanding on how actual people behave under extreme fear. Even houseflies react more dramatically to a fly swatter than Jason apparently did to the gunshot. Well, it goes without saying that these detectives continued to ignore Rebecca's story again, and the next question was asked. So, when he fell on the ground, were you between your bed and the dresser? Rebecca said, "See, yeah, I don't remember. I know he was laying this way when I called the police, so I don't know. Did you have to go in there and get JC?" "I didn't get her that way. I went through the window." "And then you came all the way back around and got her?" "Yes, but I called 911 after I saw blood. Now, I left the room. I'm pretty sure I left the room. Once I saw blood, I went to get the phone because I'm like, oh my gosh." Yeah, oh my gosh. So after shooting her husband 3 times in the back, her reactions, oh my gosh, that's it. That's the emotional range that we're working with. No screaming. She's not hysterical. She's not panicking. She's not shocked. She didn't exactly immediately call 911 either in absolute terror because you just took someone's life or almost took someone's life. Nope. According to Rebecca, the response to firing multiple bullets into her husband's back and into his head was basically the same reaction as somebody if they spilled coffee on their shirt before they went to work. Like, oh my gosh, where's my Tide to Go stain eraser pen? Oh my gosh, I hope I have it with me. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. I can't go into work with this stain on my shirt. Oh my gosh. It's her reaction. She literally said, oh my gosh, to shooting her husband. It's insane to me. And absolutely insane. And to that, I have to say, please, Rebecca, you're describing an event that would psychologically obliterate most people for the rest of their lives. Even people who kill in genuine self-defense are often traumatized. They're shaking, sobbing, hyperventilating, disassociating, vomiting, unable to process what they've just done. Taking a human life, especially someone you were married to for years, is not usually followed by the emotional energy of someone realizing that they forgot to thaw out their chicken for dinner. Oh my gosh. Maybe I can have the neighbor go over there and take the chicken out of the freezer for me. And let's not forget, according to Rebecca's own story, she believes she was moments away from being murdered just a few minutes before this. Not even minutes, probably just seconds. This was supposedly the ultimate life or death act of survival. The culmination of terror and fear, adrenaline and desperation, but somehow after pulling the trigger 3 times, shooting bullets into her husband's back, all she can muster is being mildly inconvenienced and a little bit of a, oh my gosh. It sounds absurd because it is absurd. It's like the emotional response never matches the severity of what Rebecca is trying to tell us. The words should describe all of the horror, every single moment of it, every second of it. And sometimes Rebecca kind of almost gets a little bit of the way there with it. But the reactions sound like she's narrating a minor household inconvenience. There's this really bizarre disconnect where she wants people to believe that she survived the most terrifying moment of her life, yet emotionally reacts like somebody finding out that the McDonald's ice cream machine is broken again, damn it. Mild disappointment, right? No, I'm not actually mildly disappointed. When I want a McFlurry, I want a McFlurry. So that was a bad analogy. But anyway, she's acting at this point mildly disappointed, briefly inconvenienced, and then she immediately moved on with life like absolutely nothing significant just happened. Where is the traumatized person recounting a horrifying event? Instead, we're sitting here with somebody trying very hard to perform what they think shock is supposed to sound like, without actually understanding the weight and the gravity of what they're actually trying to describe. The shooting and ultimate killing of her own husband and the father of her children. If I had to compare this lady's emotional range to anybody, it'd probably be Harrison Ford, who famously has 0 emotional range. Except at least Harrison Ford somehow manages to unintentionally become hilarious while sounding emotionally inconvenienced by literally everything. Harrison can stare blankly into the void and mumble one sentence and somehow it becomes iconic. Rebecca does it and it sounds like a bored McDonald's employee practicing the best ways to say the McFlurry machine is down. So yeah, after that absolutely earth-shattering emotional collapse that Rebecca had after shooting Jason, you know, that unforgettable oh my gosh heard round the world, she somehow managed to gather the strength to continue functioning. Truly an inspiration, right? Shakespeare couldn't have written things better himself. This dialogue that's raw and emotional and devastating. Yeah, no, Rebecca Rogers is no Shakespeare. So next, the detective asked about where the phone she called 911 from was. He said, quote, "And you think the phone was somewhere else in the house?" "I'm pretty certain it was, yeah." "And that's when you stepped over and got the phone and called 911? "I don't remember stepping over him at that point. I don't know. I stepped over him when I came in to call when I was on the police dispatch." At the same time, the second detective who briefly left the room, he came back in, and guess what he had in his hand? A toy gun. They were in mid-conversation, and he has this toy revolver in his hand, and he says, "Let's walk her through it with this." I swear this officer literally said that with the same enthusiasm and energy as a middle school boy who just discovered his dad's stash of dirty magazines. He's so excited to get this lady to show him how they did this with that toy gun. It's flippin' hilarious and worth watching this entire thing, if you ask me. I'm actually going to put a picture that I'm going to generate with ChatGPT in the thumbnail of this episode of Rebecca looking stupid, holding a toy gun. And that's literally what I'm going to tell ChatGPT to do, and we'll see what the results are, okay? Stay tuned for that. But yeah, they're actually about to hand Rebecca a toy gun and ask her to physically act out what happened. Like, this is a real thing that occurred in reality in this interrogation room. Like, seriously, this is sitcom level type of shit. At this point, this interrogation isn't feeling anything at all like a homicide investigation and more like the world's worst community theater production, in all honesty. I half expected somebody to wheel out a little cardboard set label that said "Hallway of Lies" while the detective taps his foot and drums his finger on the table and picks lint off his coat as he quietly sighs into his coffee for the 15th time that day. And honestly, the sheer absurdity of it all makes it feel like the investigators themselves had to reach the point where they're internally going, "All right, ma'am, Let's hear version number 47. Show us again with the Fisher Price revolver. They're doing this purely for fun, to make fun of this lady at this point. It has to be. They cannot be serious right now. Because imagine being a grown adult sitting there having to reenact your incredibly traumatic and dramatic, life-altering, violent, yet consistently and constantly shifting story with the plastic toy gun while everyone in the room pretends that this is remotely normal behavior. This is definitely middle school drama class vibes going on in this interrogation room. Like, okay, Rebecca, and then where did the invisible choking happen? Can you put an X on the spot where all of this went down? It's starting to feel like these detectives are making her do this purely just to see how committed she is to this nonsense. It's like they're thinking, no, keep going. We really want to understand how you shot this guy. This guy who was apparently trying to kill you softly with his hands, but decided to go hard with the gun instead. But you managed to not only beat him to the punch, but also managed to shoot him in the back while he was advancing your direction facing you. Show us with all your laws of physics-defying marksmanship. You literally cannot make this stuff up. I mean, Rebecca is trying to. It's not going well. They'll get to making her use that gun as an example of what she did in just a little bit, and we'll be walking and laughing our way through that pretty soon. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it and recording this, it really is a little bit disturbing. If this had been an actual domestic violence situation and Rebecca did in fact shoot Jason in true self-defense, if he had been choking her and she almost died, if she almost passed out, but managed to somehow get her hands on a gun before he did, having her reenact the moment using a toy gun, I think that I would see a lawsuit there. This doesn't sound right at all to me. But fortunately, in this case, nobody thinks Rebecca did this in self-defense. So I'm okay with it. So now these detectives are trying to figure out how far away Rebecca was from Jason when she shot him. And it is becoming more and more difficult for Rebecca to make this make sense because the space that she has to work with where Jason was at, somewhere near the bedroom door, but also near the closet door, which is close to the bedroom door, it's not a whole lot. And these investigators are really just kind of digging for inconsistencies that don't make sense. Rebecca's not giving herself a whole lot of room between herself, her holding the gun pointed at him with arms extended, and where Jason actually is standing. All I can really gather is what she's describing isn't lining up with what they already know about the scene and the shooting. So one of the detectives says, the reason I say that, maybe you were standing between the bed and the dresser because, and she interrupted him and said, there's not a whole lot of room in the room. He continued, and if you're pointing the pistol at him, I mean, he's got to be a little further away than right? And she replied, it was more on this level. And she's kind of trying to make it seem like she wasn't extending her arms that much, but she's also just wanting to disagree just to disagree. Again, with the way that he was pointing and holding the gun, she can't even agree with that. And they're just kind of sort of going through how she could have been holding the gun versus how he fell and where he landed and how that adds up, or in Rebecca's case, how it doesn't add up. So to try and get ahead of her bullshit, inconsistencies, Rebecca then comes up with, honestly, it was so quick, I'm not certain. And I really don't remember shooting that many times. I really don't. I just remember seeing blood on his head, and I didn't shoot again or at him. Did he grab his head or anything like that? Or when you shot him the first time, did he? Now, this next part is so unbelievably ridiculous. What Rebecca says, the way she says it, the way she claims it all happened, the dialogue she attributes to Jason, the dramatic little performance of it all, it stops being funny and starts feeling personally insulting to the collective intelligence of anybody listening to this crap. Like, ma'am, it isn't even believable enough for a low budget Lifetime movie, or you're actually preferring to watch the arthritis commercials instead of the actual movie. Every detail somehow sounds simultaneously overacted and under rehearsed. It's like she watched 3 crime dramas, skimmed through a Pinterest board called How Humans React Under Stress, and decided to just freestyle the rest of it. And the director was like, okay, wing it. And the way she recounts it all so casually while sprinkling in these absurd little details that make it even worse, it's mind numbing. You're sitting here listening like, okay, so now we're just fully making things up with pure confidence. You almost admire the commitment that Rebecca has to this bullshit. And don't get me wrong, I did say almost. Lucky for us, it just keeps getting better and better. After the detective asked if Jason grabbed his head or anything, Rebecca said, he was like, yeah. He was like, hollering. The detective said, like, the first time you shot him, he hollered? Well, I just shot. I don't even know if I aimed at him. Oh, honey, you aimed at him. You super aimed at him. You super duper aimed at him like an expert. Honestly, I never shot the gun. This was the first time. The first time in the dining room. And then when I came in there, I didn't even know if I could shoot him. And honestly, I didn't know if he got a hold of it if he would shoot me first. So these detectives totally ignoring that she's certain that if he got the gun first, he would have shot her. And you know what? He would have probably been justified because she was coming at him with a gun. But again, totally ignoring that she just said that he would kill her if he had the chance, the detective said, did he holler anything after you shot him? She replied with the same thing she just said because, plot twist, he wasn't hollering at her. If he was, she would have had a better answer to these questions than what she's about to say, which is, he was hollering, but I don't know if I'd hit him until I saw the blood. Yeah, that's not an answer to their question and just repeating things that she's already said. So now she's avoiding answering as to not get herself locked into a story again. So the detective asked again, what was he saying? Rebecca's brilliant answer? She replied, at that point, nothing. Excuse me? You literally just said he was hollering at you, but now he's not doing anything. He's saying nothing. Okay. She continued, nothing. He didn't come after me at that point anymore. So the detective pointed out what I just said. Quote, you said he was hollering. Was he hollering words at you or was he hollering in pain? And again, Rebecca is going to say words but have no answer. Quote, no, just like, I don't even know, just probably, I don't know, like, shit? I don't know. She tosses her hands up at her sides and lets them drop down. And it's becoming more frequent, this whole exaggerated gesturing that she's making. Every time she says, I don't know, she throws her hands and arms up in exasperation. And you could tell with this body language and her movements, her cringy laughing, that she just wants this all to come to an end. And frankly, I would too if it wasn't so entertaining and funny. And the whole situation isn't what's funny. It's just funny how she's trying to squirm her way out of going to jail a little bit later because in about 30 more minutes, they're about to slap some handcuffs on her. Here's a pro tip. If you shoot somebody and you realize that those shots have entered the body through the back, you're going to go to jail that day. Plain and simple. You might be able to wiggle and jiggle your way out of it later on, but most likely 99.9% of the time, you're going to jail for at least a few days until a judge says, well, let's review this. Let's give you some bail. We'll talk about it at a later time. But at this point in the interview, Rebecca still has it in her mind that she's going to be able to pass go and collect $200, but she is sorely mistaken. So she continued, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not gonna lie to you. Yeah, you are. I'm an honest person in your own ass backwards mind, maybe. Not out here in reality with the rest of us, Rebecca. The detective, with as much reassurance that he could muster, which is almost zero, he said to that, quote, I'm not trying to say that you're being deceitful. And from there, he just kind of sort of trailed off. He didn't even have the energy to continue to pretend he was trying to provide her with any kind of comfort. He wants to tell her she's full of shit without saying she's full of shit, but she ended up cutting him off and said, I know I'm in a bad situation. Believe me, I have 4 kids. Playing the I'm the mom of 4, sympathize with me again card. It's played out, Rebecca. Played out. This is not a good situation. And I love him. I'm like, not happy right now. Okay. That's the big emotional reaction. I'm not happy right now. That's the line that she went with. Ma'am, you just turned your husband's head into a home improvement project while his children were in the next room, and you're delivering your statement with the emotional intensity of someone returning a slightly overly foamy latte at Starbucks. At no time during this interrogation, this interview, that we've been talking about this now, this is the 4th episode, the 4th that's going to be 2-hour long episode that we've been talking about this lady. Did she ever say the words, I can't believe I've done this. Oh my God, what have I done? My poor Jason, what am I going to do? How am I going to live? Why did this have to happen? None of that. Just calm, cool, collected, as if this whole entire incident is some mild inconvenience, as if Jason forgot to take out the trash before she shot him. It's honestly incredible. According to Rebecca's performance, we're supposed to believe that this was a terrifying moment. But she sounds more emotional affected if her Amazon package were to come late. But sure, whatever. Maybe this is the reaction of someone who definitely feared for their lives and didn't want to spend the last several minutes sounding like she was just annoyed at Amazon's customer service. Oh, and Rebecca's not happy right now? Well, thank God we cleared that up about who the real victim is here. Apparently, the biggest tragedy in all of this is that she's now realizing that she may have left herself one hell of a mess to have to go home to clean up, right? Actually, scratch that. Rebecca's not going to be cleaning anything up for a while because county jails tend to put a real dent into your housekeeping schedule at home. So now either somebody's going to need to hire a cleaning service or, much more likely, Rebecca just dumped this entire nightmare onto her daughters to deal with. Real thoughtfulness there. Stellar maternal instincts on display. What a great mom. I hope they all had a fan-fucking-tastic Mother's Day last weekend. For real. Honestly. Good job, Mom. Killing the dad. Let's go celebrate you. Meanwhile, Jason, lying there, dying for 2 days while the kids are supposed to get ready to go back to school on Monday. The shooting happened, I believe, Saturday going into Sunday. Monday, they're supposed to start school. He dies on Tuesday. But yes, Rebecca, tell us more about how you're unhappy. The timing is incredible. Unbelievable decision making with this woman. True Mother of the Year material. I can practically hear the commercials now. Some moms pack lunches. Some moms traumatize their entire families and create a crime scene at their home just days before school starts. Phenomenal work, Rebecca. Absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, getting back to it, after Rebecca informed everybody that she was like totally not happy with how her evening unfolded, one of the detectives somehow found the strength to softly mumble, "We just need to piece this together," which hardly sounded like any kind of investigative strategy and more like this guy trying to emotionally survive the next several hours of listening to this lady's bullshit. Rebecca pressed on, though, still defensively trying to explain away Jason's shooting in the back. And listen, you almost have to admire her commitment to this story. I think I've said that already. That makes less sense every time she opens her stupid mouth. But she goes on to say, And I don't wish him ill. I don't want him to die. I don't, but I'm scared if he lives, he's probably going to kill me later. I don't know. I mean, this is not a good situation. Boo hoo 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 hoo. Wow. What shocking concern this lady has. Yes, because after surviving being shot multiple times, the very first thing Jason would obviously want to do is launch into some elaborate revenge plot instead of, oh, I don't know, continuing to be alive. Although, ironically, if Jason had survived, Rebecca probably would have ended up serving a whole hell of a lot more time than she ultimately did, mainly because Jason would have been around to give his version of events. And I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that his account probably would have sounded a tiny bit more plausible than this rambling malarkey that Rebecca's been putting on. But she continues with the exhausted and sad and whiny monologue. It hasn't been a good situation for a long time. And after all that, after her dramatics and her screechy whininess, the detectives hit her with this incredibly passionate and emotionally invested response of, it's understandable. That's it. That's literally all they had. Not because they believed her, even though they said the words, that's understandable, but because these men had clearly reached the psychological equivalent of staring out a rainy window, questioning every career choice that led them to this moment in this interrogation room with this woman. They have less than zero sympathy for her at this point. If anything, they probably expect her to apologize for them for having to make them sit through this never-ending avalanche of self-serving nonsense without being able to have the ability to roll their eyes at her out loud, because you know damn well they wish they could, and they would if they could. Now, we have reached one of my favorite parts of this whole entire thing. Well, technically, it's the beginning of one of my favorite parts, because Rebecca is about to launch into an almost acrobatic routine of contradictions right in front of these detectives. The next profound statement Rebecca delivers is actually almost complimentary towards Jason. Almost. In the most backhanded, carefully calculated, let me sound reasonable for 12 seconds kind of way imaginable. And what makes this so beautiful here is that within mere minutes, Rebecca completely yanks the rug out from under her own statement and makes a full-on take backsies right there in the interrogation room. It is honestly magnificent to watch and to listen to, because all this woman is doing over and over and over again is desperately trying to maneuver herself into coming out the other side of this smelling like roses. She'll say literally anything if she thinks it makes her sound justified, sympathetic, terrified, reasonable, victimized, saintly. Whatever the role she thinks is going to work best for her in every moment, even if it directly contradicts something she said 5 minutes earlier. It is truly an incredible marvel of inconsistency. So Rebecca then says, you know, he's not an evil person. I wouldn't be back with him, but he's scary at times, you know? I mean, even driving, he was like punching the dashboard because the song came on while we were driving, and I turned the volume up and he just punched it. And while saying this, Rebecca actually throws her fist out in front of her in literally the most pathetic manner possible. It was like reaching out with your hand like you're holding a dead fish. And to be honest, it was hardly the terrifying reenactment of raw violence that I think Rebecca thought it was going to be. It looked more like someone demonstrating how they politely knock on a public restroom door. So, let's get this straight now, okay? Are you with me? The allegedly chilling example of uncontrollable rage is here. He punches the dashboard because the music got turned up, and that's it. That's the blockbuster evidence. I mean, listen, maybe Jason was annoyed. Maybe he just fucking hated that song. Maybe it was Nickelback that came on unexpectedly. I don't know. But Rebecca is presenting this like she narrowly escaped a hostage situation because a man got irritated in traffic and smacked the dashboard one time. The detectives are just sitting there having to absorb this information like, yes, okay, a dashboard was struck during an argument over the volume knob. This is truly riveting information. So they had their questions that they wanted to ask her and said, have you ever tried to seek help or anything for his abuse or him being abusive? And this is where Rebecca somehow manages to contradict herself in what I'm pretty sure qualifies in like record time. Like the efficiency is next level. Rebecca says, no. I mean, we went to counseling. We've been to marriage counseling. Oh, okay. Fascinating. So in the span of less than half a sentence, we went from no, we didn't seek help to actually yes, we did seek help, professional help at that. I mean, dreamers, what in the psychological ping pong match is actually happening here? It's like her brain started one answer and took a sharp exit halfway through, hit a guardrail, and drove straight into the truth before swerving back into nonsense again? Ma'am, you cannot answer no to seeking help and then immediately follow up with, we've been to marriage counseling. That is seeking help. That is literally what marriage counseling is. The interrogation is starting to feel less like an investigation and more like we're collectively participating in some kind of weird group project, and we're all in the group with the one person who's just there to take the credit for it and didn't do any of the work, and that person is Rebecca. So this gets even better. And I'm not even finished with the second part of my favorite part. But the detective next asked, when's the last time y'all did, referring to the marriage counseling? Rebecca replied, we've done it twice now in our marriage. The last time, though, like a month ago, we stopped. Who was the counselor or what was it with? And Rebecca, she then has this to say about that. Well, we paid cash because we didn't want it to go on record as far as like to hurt us that we were seeing a therapist. Heh heh heh. In the middle of the sentence, she giggled. Heh heh heh. Heh heh heh. Her name is Erica, but we stopped going. I mean, we went to her for over a year. Okay, so more lies and bullshit. I don't believe this woman any further than I can throw her, and she made sure that it would be impossible for investigators to track down this marriage and family therapist. They paid cash to not go on record? What the actual fuck does that even mean? And I don't buy her nonsensy excuse for not wanting this to go on record. Who's looking? Hurt them? Literally, nobody cares. But when it actually matters, when Rebecca is sitting there trying to establish this terrifying, long-running history of domestic violence, serious enough to justify her shooting her husband, this is the material she brings to the table. After 14 to 15 years of marriage, the horror stories have amounted to 1. Jason getting mad because she allegedly embarrassed him at the restaurant. 2. Jason losing his temper because she smashed up his cigarettes. And 3. Jason punching a dashboard over the volume of the radio. That's it. This is the nightmare abuse dossier that we're working with. This is supposed to sound like a buildup to a life and death confrontation and not two people having the world's most exhausting middle-aged marital arguments. And somehow we're supposed to believe that they couldn't seek help for these petty little dust-ups because it would harm them? Harm them how exactly? Ma'am, marriage counseling is not exactly broadcasted on the Jumbotron at halftime. Therapists, last I checked, do not release weekly ranklings of dysfunctional couples to the public. There are privacy laws for a reason. Nobody's going to publish the dashboard punching chronicles in the local newspaper unless perhaps Rebecca was less worried about harm and more worried that if therapists, counselors, records, or actionable professionals got involved, there might be documentation that painted a very different picture of what was going on inside that marriage, and she did not want that ever to come out because the truth probably is, she's the problem. Because now it suddenly matters. Now there's a shooting. Now Jason is dying. Now investigators exist. Now subpoenas are in effect. Now therapists potentially become witnesses. And if this had gone to trial, maybe all of those private counseling conversations would have come to the surface and revealed everything Rebecca didn't want anybody hearing. Like the possibility that she wasn't exactly the helpless, trembling victim that she's trying to portray herself as. It might harm them. You know what, Rebecca Rogers? You know what is actually harmful? The gun. The gun was harmful. You were so deeply concerned about protecting everyone's reputation and privacy, yet somehow you had no issues pumping your husband full of bullets like this was just another item on the weekend to-do list. Well, so now the detectives once again seemed to be reacting to Rebecca's dramatic storytelling with all of the emotional investment of two exhausted men waiting for their lunch break. They really don't care about the weak, wobbly performance that Rebecca was giving. They just wanted to get through the timeline without their brains leaking out of their ear holes. So one of them tries to drag the circus back onto the rails and says, I'm going to back up a little bit. When he choked you, when he was choking you and he finally let you go, is that when he went towards the bedroom? And Rebecca, sounding about as convincing as a kid claiming the dog ate their homework while the untouched assignment is sitting on the kitchen table, replied, Yeah, he was choking me. Honestly, I think I came close to passing out. I don't know. I couldn't breathe. And then she points to a spot on her neck and continued, He was right here, especially on this spot. And he was saying he was going to effing jail. And then he was squeezing me so hard and he wouldn't let go. And I'm like, stop. And I fought him, trying to get him to let go of my throat. And then, I just relaxed, thinking I was going to die. Pause. Sniffles, and crickets chirping once again from the detectives. And he was still choking me. And then he stopped and said, I'm putting an end to this. The detective asked, when you said that he was putting an end to this, did you ever think that he might, he's got some history of making suicidal threats, doesn't he? Yes. Did it ever cross your mind that he was going to kill himself? No, it didn't. Not at that moment. It was more so me. I felt like he was going to try to kill me. And in hindsight, I think back and I think, God, I should have probably just taken the gun and gone outside and to a neighbor's or something. I've been to the neighbor's before. So then the detective said, well, that's my next question. Did you not think to maybe try to call 911 prior to that, to getting a gun? No, because honestly, I had no notice of him attacking me like that. I had no idea he was going to do that. And this is where she makes the second half of my favorite part of this whole entire thing. She makes a huge, major contradiction in her statement. After the detective asked her if he had ever choked her before, Rebecca said the following, quote, he choked me one other time. How long ago was that? Couple years ago, in front of my daughters. Again with the daughters, right? Got to throw them in there too to qualify her statements. Kayla stopped him and he said he didn't mean it. And then later on he said, we got into an argument and he said, just as evil. He said that night that I choked you, I meant to choke you. And I was just like, wow. And that was a couple years ago. And I left the house at that time. I went to my mom's. How long did you stay at your mom's? The night. Dreamers, do you actually see what just happened here? Not even 4 minutes earlier in Rebecca's statement. And this is a direct quote. She said, it hasn't been a good situation for a long time. He's not an evil person. I wouldn't be back with him. You remember that part. I just said it. And here, She literally says the exact opposite thing about everything. She said he wasn't an evil person, but now he is. And she said that she wouldn't be with him, yet here we are several years later, still with him, being evil again. And on top of this bullshit Sunday, it sprinkled a whole bunch of nothing makes sense. I mean, seriously, if you're choking someone out, there really is nothing else in the world that could possibly be. There is literally nothing else that being choked out can be mistaken for. Nothing. Being choked out is being choked out in every single corner of the world, amongst every person, every culture, every language, every country, every continent, even amongst the animal world. They know enough to know what choking is. And it is literally not possible to mistake that move for anything else. Period. Full stop. That's it. No more. So for her to sit there and try to say that Jason told their daughter that he didn't mean it, but then later on, evil/not evil Jason, whichever version/non-version of himself is convenient for Rebecca's story, she says he literally turns into Dr. Evil in the stupid tone that he says it in. That night I choked you, I meant to choke you. That's it. Rebecca claims Jason looked her dead in the face and said that. And her reaction to this alleged supervillain confession, delivered like one final line in a serial killer parody of a psychological thriller, was basically, wow, that's it. Didn't file a police report, didn't get a restraining order, no emergency escape plan, no fleeing in terror with the children. No, this man is dangerous and I fear for my life. Nope. She apparently reacted to this horrifying Hannibal Lecter-style declaration by casually going over to her mom's house for one night for a sleepover over some mild disagreement that she had with Jason. I mean, Rebecca is trying to paint Jason as this terrifying horror movie strangler lurking around the house ready to snap at any moment, yet her own response to his diabolicalness is, wow. As if she's like, man, anyway, I'll be at mom's, bye. The emotional math here just isn't adding up. Because if someone genuinely believed that their husband had just admitted he intentionally tried to choke them, most people would react with slightly more urgency than a disappointed teenager storming off into their room because they don't like what's for dinner. But according to Rebecca, this life-altering revelation apparently called for the same level of concern as, I just need a little bit of space right now. Yeah, totally legitimate story here. So the detective said, so safe to say you're scared of this guy. I was definitely afraid of him tonight. And yes, I've been afraid of him on occasion. Yeah, I walk on eggshells. I've told the therapist. Well, you've never thought about getting out of that kind of environment? Rebecca let out this long, dramatic sigh, as if she's getting ready to portray this exhausted widow in some weird soap opera, staring out a window sprinkled with raindrops, and in the most painfully rehearsed, soul-weary tone imaginable answered, yeah, I have. And the detective asked, any reason why you haven't? And Rebecca replied with one word, afraid. They were about to ask her another question, but Rebecca decided to play the we have kids together card again. I have 3 kids with him. He always, whenever I've tried to leave him, he gets very vicious. Oh, honey. Oh, honey. You are about to set yourself up for yet another stupid-ass contradiction here. He gets very vicious, and he's like, I don't know. That's right, you twat face. You don't know because Jason actually wasn't vicious, and you're making shit up as you go along, but you are only capable of coming up with surface-level lies. Each time these detectives try to dig a little deeper, the only thing she can come up with is she doesn't know or she can't remember. So after she said that she didn't know, he asked, when y'all were split up prior, when he was living at his parents' house? Was he abusive towards you during that time you all were split up? And here, Rebecca very quickly replied, no. Wait, what? Didn't you just say that every time you've tried to leave him, he gets vicious? Did we not literally just hear her say that? It was her saying that he was vicious when they broke up that led to the detective to ask her if he was abusive during those times that they split up, and with zero hesitation, she said no. And then she expanded on that by saying, no, he tried to make up with me. He had this note in his car and make time for Beck and the girls each day. And I mean, he was like being Mr. Wonderful. What in the holy shitballs are we talking about here? Now Rebecca is not only contradicting herself every few minutes or so, it's turned into every other sentence. And she is again going to bring her girls into the narrative to make it seem like their alleged behavior and feelings about them breaking up is the validation that this story needs. The detectives are clearly not believing Rebecca, and she has to make her daughters out to be the ones who are unhappy about mom and dad staying together, as she next says, and the girls, my older ones, are the ones, they get so upset at me because, I mean, one of them is a stepdaughter, but she's been with him since she was 4. Kayla, and Emma is 14, you know. Both of them, they're very mad at me every time I've gone back to him. We've split up more than once. So yeah, the contradictions are aplenty. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and end this episode here and make it into 5 parts because this is getting long. I guess I could go on a little bit longer, but let me look at my notes real quick. I think this is going to switch over. Yeah, after she talks about splitting up and her daughters, that they're the ones that get mad, they don't buy into that nonsense either. And so they pivoted into something else. So that'll be where we pick up the story from the next time we're back. It should be another maybe a week or so. I have to get that part written. I'm not done, but I'm trying to catch up. And I do have a missing person case that I'm going to cover next here. And I am going to get some content up on Patreon for those of you I'm getting tired already. It's only 1:00 in the afternoon, but I want to get this up. So I've been kind of rushing. I didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night because I got up early to take care of this stuff. But anyway, I want to thank you all so much for listening. I will be back with the 5th and final part of the series. I'm so sorry that it took so long, but I just thoroughly enjoy talking about this lady. The next story is kind of a sad story, and there really isn't much to make fun of or to laugh at all. But it's not going to be a very long episode. It's a missing persons case. It's a cold case. And it's the people who are involved, relatives of the young person at the center of that story, are in our Facebook group. At least one of them is. She's a sister of the missing person. So that is coming up. And I'm really excited to tell you about that because it has been a long journey getting her story on the podcast. There's apparently been some drama going on behind the scenes with some other potential maybe journalists, perhaps. I can't say too much about it. I don't know. It doesn't matter, but they're starting all over again, trying to get some traction on their missing loved one. And one of my listeners reached out to me, and so I'm going to tell her story next. I've spoken to the missing girl's sister, and she's a very lovely woman. I enjoyed talking to her thoroughly. It sounds like she's been through a lot in her life, but she's in a pretty good place right now. And so to be able to talk to her and make her laugh a little bit made me feel good. And I'm feeling really amazing about being able to share her family story in the next episode. And I wanted to do it earlier than this, but because this has taken me so long, I've had to put it off. But it is coming up after the 5th part of this series on Rebecca Rogers and all of her fuckery, for lack of a better term, but it's pretty fitting for her. But anyways, thank you all again so much for listening to this episode. I'm sorry it's taken me so long, but we're getting to the end. I promise there's only going to be 5 parts in this series. I appreciate you listening, and until next time, Take care, be safe, and sweet dreams.